Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. Special episode time as we recap 70,000 Tons of Metal 2025 in all of its glory. But before we get there, Chris, my friend, how are you doing?
Very good. We are about to start what I hope to be our next set of 250 episodes. So
yeah, this is crazy. Our Patreon members are getting this particular episode a few weeks early, but I wanted to kind of record this while everything was fresh in my mind. But it's coming out for everyone else as episode 251, so I can't believe that we are 251 episodes into this thing, and I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface with like thousands of albums. I mean, it's just incredible how much stuff there is to talk about, and stuff, like I said, that we haven't even talked about it all. I mean, there's going to be bands we're talking about in this episode that I don't think we've ever mentioned, and yet there's probably multiple albums by some of these bands that we should be covering. So it's crazy. I mean, it really is.
Would you have ever guessed that we would have recorded 250 episodes and not did an episode on Return to Heaven Denied?
As I was talking with Labyrinth's well, I shouldn't say, as I was talking with Alessandro from Vision Divine and talking about how Rob Tyrant is going to go now sing some shows with Vision Divine, I was actually thinking about how we have not covered that album, and that's ridiculous. But yes, there's other gems too that we just haven't touched, other obscure stuff that we haven't touched. I mean, it's just it's one thing after another, but I guess that means there's at least another 250 to go at a minimum. So good times ahead for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of classic Iron Maiden albums. We haven't done any Ozzy solo albums. There's still a lot of Black Sabbath albums.
We haven't done any of the European thrash. We haven't done anything outside the big four. We haven't done just I mean, there's a million symphonic female-fronted bands. We still have
the rest of the Halloween and Sabotage albums to go, and
like I said, only scratching the surface because we'll see. And we haven't done any Rough Silk either, so it's just a lot to talk about on the show. But I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're connecting again. I feel like I've been out at sea for days now, but we're back, and I just want to kind of walk you through the recap, the good, the bad, and the ugly from all that was 70,000 Tons of Metal. And I think that the story this year really does start with the lead up and build up to the lineup. The skipper Andy, the Glenn, if you will, of 70,000 Tons had made a statement earlier in the year saying that he was going to do a better job of announcing bands in a timely fashion. And it started off really well. He announced like the first 30 or so bands pretty fast and furiously, and the lineup was really, really good. Nothing that was blowing me away or anything like that, but just a lot of good bands and some stuff I was curious to check out, and some I was really curious to check out. I'll speak about that later on. But then things came to a grinding halt, and I know that a lot of people were making jokes about the fact that it was just almost comical how bad the last 2 weeks were, where all of a sudden he just starts announcing all these, in many cases, second-rate bands, and a lot of stuff that he seemed to maybe not spend as much money on, a lot of domestic bands, whatever it is, and then just ultimately people trying to plan a trip around the fact that they didn't know what the lineup was. So there were gripes, there were jokes. I was somewhat in the middle. I think that they should have definitely announced this stuff earlier. I know that for a fact there were bands that had committed that dropped out for one reason or another. And so I know for a fact that there were bands that were announced late that were contacted a week before the cruise started. So there were logistical issues. But at the same time, I do think that the better practice would be to announce the vast majority of the bands well in advance of the ship departing. However, it's sold out. And so I don't know that it's going to change, because at the end of the day, people spent their hard-earned money and nobody else could theoretically fit on that ship. Just from a macro sense, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that they should be better about announcing this stuff early from a business standpoint or from a fan standpoint? I'm curious to know what you think.
I used to think so, but I think at this point, people are paying for the experience, and I think that honestly, I think if somebody is going to make their decision about whether or not they want to go based on the lineup, they're probably going to just end up waiting to the point where it becomes too late, or it's just like not feasible to whip something up that's that costly in a short amount of time. So I think that it's the sort of thing where, you know, the people that decide to go are going because they know they're going to have a good time, and they know, I mean, in all honesty, if they're going to have 60 bands playing, like the likelihood that there's at least 10 to 15 bands that you're really excited to see is pretty strong. I mean, just looking at the lineup myself, like had I gone, I would have been more than thrilled with the bands that were playing, and then would have been interested to kind of get dragged along to see some other stuff a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. I wouldn't have had any complaints about this particular lineup. I mean, it's like I always say, like, if your sports team sucks and you still sink $150 per ticket to go see them play, you're not telling the owners that you want there to be a change. So as long as people continue to sell it out, I mean, there's no reason why they should change how they do business. Like, people are they can sit online and complain all they want, but if they're still going to go, you're not really making your point. So,
yeah,
you know, honestly, in my opinion, like, you just, I don't know. To me, I don't think there's ever been a lineup in the history of the entire 70,000 tons of metal that I would look at and say I would have been disappointed with this lineup. Like, I think there's always, it depends. If you're looking at it like, I want there to be 30 to 40 bands that I'm excited to see, that might be harder. That might be harder to fulfill, especially because, like you said, like a number of bands are kind of on the lower end, especially the ones that are announced towards the end. But honestly, by the time, like, you know, summer was over, I think there were enough bands announced that I would have been happy with the lineup as it was. And then anything else that got added after the fact, like your Strikers and your Kiss and Dynamites and your Seven Kingdoms, I think all those bands would have just been gravy for me.
I think that when you go into this and you gave the number of 10 to 15, and with every band playing twice, you can't see everything anyway. So even though this was a weaker lineup, and I use that term in quotes, and I think it was weaker than last year's, at least for my taste, when the schedule finally came out, and I'll talk about the schedule in a second, but when the schedule finally came out, I found myself bouncing back and forth like a pinball between the stuff I knew I wanted to see, the stuff I wanted to check out, and the stuff that I was at least curious enough that, or somebody dragged me to, right? So, like, I had no issue with that, and there was it wasn't like I was sitting in my room with lack of things to do. I feel like if you're a metal fan, I don't know what the percentage is, but you're going to like a decent number of these bands, and you're going to have the chance to see them twice. What I was also a little upset about is that the schedule didn't come out until like the day before, or like hours before we departed. And I thought that was a little weird, because it's like, the very least, if you know who the bands are, like, announce the lineup so people can react accordingly and kind of plan their nights, right? Because there's planning that goes into this. You can't just kind of wing it, because you got to figure out, well, like, if you miss a band on the going out to see, you got to get them back on the way back to Miami and things like that. And there is planning that's involved. I mean, for example, I knew I was missing Arcturus going out to see, because they were playing it like some god awful hour. And I just said to myself, like, I'm not going to make this set. And it's a problem for me, because I really wanted to see them. I just didn't want to see them at 3:00 in the morning. So I immediately looked to see when they were playing on the back end. I saw it was at 7:00 or something like that. I'm like, I like put a star next to that set. I wasn't missing the 7:00 Arcturus set. Things like that is my point. But, nonetheless, I fly down to Miami the day before the cruise, and I felt like absolute trash. I went to grab a drink. I grabbed some food, and to be honest with you, after checking into the Airbnb, I went to like some Cuban restaurant at night, and I would hit the bed by like midnight. I did not feel well, and I had been fighting something off for days, and I just couldn't shake it. And it got so bad that I woke up the next morning around 8 o'clock. So I had well, maybe about 7:30. I had about 7.5 hours of sleep. I actually dragged myself to the first urgent care I could find that opened at 8 o'clock in the morning and begged them to just see me and like examine me, right? Because like they didn't take my insurance. I mean, the whole thing was a disaster, but like I didn't want to be out to sea for 4 or 5 days and not at least know that I was looked at. So I wound up getting looked at. They prescribed me an antibiotic. I don't know if I needed it. They prescribed it, but they did say that I had some sort of a respiratory infection. So I actually had like a steroid before I even left to go into, but you know what? I'll be damned. It cleared me up. So it seemed to work. I did not feel great that first night of the cruise. And by day 2, I started feeling markedly better. So it started to work, but this could have gone really, really bad. And I actually feel bad because as I'm sitting here, I'm getting text messages from my cabin mates, all of whom are sick. So I'm not saying it was me per se. They weren't sharing my exact room. But like when you're on this thing, you're just around so many people that one of the downsides is you're probably going to catch something on the cruise.
Well, if you're gonna get sick at Prague Power, you're gonna get sick on this thing. I mean, like
it's a germ fest.
I got COVID at Prague Power this past year, so I mean, I'm not at all surprised. I've seen a slew of people on Facebook just say like, I came back and I'm sick, and I know Mark said he's not feeling well, and I think Keith is okay. He actually survived. He got like the flu at the end of last year.
Oh,
so
he was in bad shape. We were joking about that when we were down there, but he looked like a new man, and I'm happy about it because he had a rough go of it last year.
Yeah, I think more people than not that went. I saw a post that they were not feeling well, so not surprising. When you just put that many people in one place, and then you're like kind of stuck on a boat, and there's really nowhere to go. It's just going to happen, you know?
Yeah, I totally get it. So we get onto the boat around 11 o'clock, smooth sailing, no pun intended, check into the room around 1 o'clock. After some Johnny Rockets for lunch, the music started around 5:15 in the afternoon with Onslaught and Beyond Creation, both of whom I missed. We decided to go to dinner right off the bat, and I knew that by doing that, I was going to miss Twilight Force. But at the same time, I knew I would be ready to go see Sonata Arctica at 7:30. We were hungry after a long day, so we actually wound up going to dinner that night. As soon as the restaurants opened around 5:30, and the first set I saw was Sonata Arctica. They were playing inside the Royal Theater, which, if you recall from your time just being on Royal Caribbean's cruise ships, it's that big theater that's kind of in like the, you know, it looks like a theater. I don't know how else to say it. It's the second biggest venue outside the pool deck, which doesn't open until day 2 because they're building it that first night while the other 3 stages are being used. So really, night 1, only 3 of the 4 stages are in use, but at any given time, 3 bands could be playing at the same time. So Sonata Arctica plays. I thought the sound was pretty decent, and I absolutely marked out. They played an extended version of Replica, and it went right into San Sebastian, and I was like in my glory. I felt like crap, but I was really in my glory. And then they went into My Land, and I'm like, this is just the end of their set. Like the last 20 minutes of their set was just unreal. I felt like I was 18 again, and the crowd was eating it up. The place was packed with people for that set. I was really happy to see them again, and it made me excited to see them at Prague Power.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Just that they're playing the old shit, as the old saying goes. I'm sure we went over this in the past, but I'll ask again. Like, as far as like food goes, is everything kind of included in your ticket? As far as like eats go, is there like kind of like higher end venues that are extra? Like, how does that go?
That's a great question. There are a number. In fact, the majority of the food venues are all inclusive and free. The buffet, the pizza place, a cafe, the chef's table, which is like a sit-down dinner. It's all included. You don't have to pay $1 for it. I am a little bit, I don't love buffets typically, just because it's a germ thing. It's a me thing. I admit it. So I don't love the buffet there just because it's just so many people, and you want to talk about getting sick. That's probably a good place to do it, no matter how everyone's hygiene is. So I do elect to pay for the premier dining package, which basically just enables you to eat at a series of restaurants, about 3 or 4 restaurants that would otherwise be a la carte, but now I'm just not paying for them. I'm paying for them up front and getting a little bit of a discount because they're hoping I don't go to all these meals. But the reality is, what it allows you to do is unlimited dining at like the sports bar, the Italian restaurant, the steakhouse, the hibachi place, like better restaurants. And to be honest with you, the food is pretty good. Dare I say good. I wouldn't say it's, the best, but it's very good. And like you can have a number of good meals, and you really do need to break up the day with this stuff, because when you're going from 10 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the morning, like you got to eat a little bit. So I opt for it. You don't have to, but to me, it's worth it. And I'm in a position that I can do it. And I'm blessed that I can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be the way to go. I would probably do the same, honestly. I just remember from like our experience going on a cruise, like that buffet does get quite repetitive because
Yes.
It's a lot of the same stuff too. So it's nice to be able to go to like a nicer dining situation and have a little bit more as far as variety goes.
And you never have to worry about tons of people at the restaurants because A, most people do the buffet thing, but B, most people are there for the music. So like if you can find your hour or hour and a half to fit in the meal, you usually have the place to yourself or very few other people. And at this point, the party that I go with, and we're up to 11 at this point, everyone kind of just goes together and does it because it's just, now it's hard to find the schedule where everyone wants to skip a band to go do this. But at the end of the day, if you can find the schedule or the vast majority of the 11 of us were doing it, it became just a nice tradition as part of the cruise. It's just part of what we do. And listen, the reality is if they were all going during something that I had to see, I'll figure it out and do something on my own. But like it did work out. But yeah, it was. So we went for steak that first night. I enjoyed my meal. I have no complaints whatsoever.
Nice.
After Sonata, I went to go check out a band for one song. And it wasn't that it was not good. It was just I had to go see Hammerfall. So it was like I had a little bit of a gap. So I went to go see Decapitated, which is like a death metal band. They were really good. I heard some people griping about the sound. I thought it actually sounded pretty good, at least from where I was. It's a band that I could totally see myself listening to, but like I just don't know anything by them. But they're like a classic death metal band. They've been around forever. At some point, maybe we'll even cover one of their albums because I thought it was a really cool sound. But one and done for me. And then I went to go see Hammerfall, also in the same theater where Sonata Arctica had played just half an hour or 45 minutes before. This was a little bit of an issue. They started the show at 9:15, and at this point, I'd been up since 7:45 in the morning. I had been to urgent care. Like it had been a day already, and it kind of put me to sleep. It wasn't a bad set, and I actually went to see them a second time, and I really enjoyed it. But this particular set at this particular time, I don't know. It just didn't click with me. It was like a decent mix, but I don't want a decent mix of songs. I want Legacy of Kings and Glory of the Brave. And so like it fell a little bit on deaf ears for me. And I found the set a little bit hard to stay into, although the performance itself was very good. It's just the second set was better. And I'll explain that when we get there. After Hammerfall, I went to see Kalma, which is a Finnish melodic death metal band, almost touching on power metal. This was one of those bands I wasn't going to say I was excited for it. They were playing some of their older albums in their entirety, but I was curious to see them because I've been a fan of the band for quite some time. I thought the vocals were a little bit meh, but at the same time, the performance was really good. It was jam-packed, and another example of how live keyboards make all the difference in the world. So it was a cool set for what it was. I can check them off the list. And ultimately, there was really only 2 other bands, I guess, that night that I had on my radar that I had to stay up for. The first being Emperor. I have seen them now a lot, which is kind of crazy because 10 years ago they weren't even on my radar, and now I probably have seen them a half dozen times. And it was exactly what you'd expect. It was heavy. It was intense. It was just missing their second guitar player, Samuth, which is kind of weird. But what Isan had said during the set was that there was some issue, and they basically had to record his guitar tracks or use recorded tracks for the second guitar. But to their credit, you couldn't really tell, except it just looked a little empty on stage. And I kept thinking to myself, these guys have been touring incessantly now for the better part of 6 or 7 years. They have to make another album. Just because, I'm not saying that they don't have 4 classic albums, but they need to do something a little bit different because the shows are a little bit samey at this point, but very good at what they do. And then lastly, the set of the night was Kissin' Dynamite. I was exhausted. It was 12:30 in the morning, but I had to go see them. And this was one of the late additions, which I was extremely pleased about. I saw them right before COVID in 2020. So here we are 5 years later. And to say that they're back with a bang is not inaccurate. The new stuff sounds really good live, and I'm just happy that I got to see them again. This of all bands was the one I think you would have enjoyed the most.
Yeah, that's probably the band I was most jealous about because outside of Majestica, all the other bands I've seen that I would want to see and will probably be able to see again, some of which will be in the near future, Symphony X and Sonata Arctica in particular.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, and we will get to all things Majestica shortly, but I'll say this. Went to bed after Kissin' Dynamite. I got probably 7.5 hours of sleep, and when I woke up, I didn't feel perfect, but I felt damn close to it, and I felt like a new man that second day. And as has become a bit of a tradition for me, I try to check out that first band on the pool deck, no matter who's playing, just because it's such a cool atmosphere. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. The sun is shining. In years past, it was Freedom Call, which was incredible just because I had never seen them before. This year was a band called Trollfest. Are you familiar with them at all?
Not really, no.
7 guys come out on stage in pink onesies with flamingo masks and pink and black like corpse paint. It was, I mean, I'm describing it perfectly, but if you can't picture it, there's probably a reason for it. This is a band I would have never listened to, but for the festival being in the right place at the right time. It was entertaining. It's not my thing necessarily, but they got the right slot, so I got to see them, and the crowd seemed to be eating it up. I still don't know what to make of it. I kind of have like a bit of an Ailstorm vibe, I guess, but it was a spectacle, and it was something that I think that it was interesting to see, and a band I would never pay to go see live, but if they're on the boat, sure, I can go check out a Trollfest set. I'm just not going to start buying all their albums.
Speaking of trolls, did you see Fin Troll? And,
I did not.
If you did, we'll just get to it when you get to it. But I was just curious.
Did not see them. They were one of the casualties that I would have checked out, but it just didn't work into the schedule. I feel like that would have been a band you would have gone to see.
Yeah, I've seen them before. I just was curious. Have you seen them before?
I've never seen them.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's why I thought maybe you would have checked them out. But
it's
scheduling is
it's that, and that's what it was. Like, I'm trying to think. I'm looking here. When Fin Troll played, I went to see another band, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then on the way back, Fin Troll played. Just looking at the schedule here. On the way back, they played. Let's see. They played. I guess I could have seen them on the way back, but I was eating dinner, so I didn't see them on the way back. But they were a casualty there. But during their first set, and I'll get to that momentarily, there was something that I was watching that I was very eager to see in its place. But that's later in the day. After Trollfest, I go see a band called Lotharo. My friend Frank is a big fan of this band, so I was curious to check them out. It was pretty good. It was a high energy set for 10:45 in the morning. A little bit of thrash, a little bit of power metal. And a very interesting female vocalist who's not exactly clean. She almost reminded me a little bit of Nora from Battle Beast with that lower register, but a very powerful voice. And a good set. Nothing that blew me away, but enjoyable enough. After Lotharo, I went to grab a quick bite at the Italian place for lunch, and then I went to see one of the bands that was high up on my list of bands I wanted to see, and that was Crown Shift. If you recall, they were in my top 50 this year. They came out with one album. It's melodic death metal, very, very catchy stuff, but there were delays, and this typically doesn't happen. They usually run a pretty tight ship, no pun intended, but here they there were delays in getting them onto the pool deck. And I think it was in part due to the windy conditions, because it was quite windy, but they eventually started playing. I unfortunately only got to see one song. And it sounded really good, and I wish I saw more. And I knew I was going to try to catch their second set, but I left to go see Majestica because that to me was the priority. And I did. I got to see them in the theater. It was exactly what you expected. It was a fun set. It was a tight set. The mix was okay. It wasn't superb, but by the end of the set, it got really good. So I think it just took them a while to get warmed up. And those live keys would have made a big difference, unfortunately, but they did not have them. But they will go over very well in Atlanta if they play. And I say that only because of the visa issues. I have no inside information. I just know that there's issues related to visas. So I hold my breath with everything related to every band that's on that bill. But I sent you a couple of videos. I hope you enjoyed what I sent. I did not catch their second set. They played the last band on the cruise at like 1:30 in the morning on the way back to Miami, and I had to get up for a flight. It just wasn't going to work out. So I'm betting on Atlanta. And I also was happy that I got to see the best of set, if you will, not just the new album, which I'm sure is great, but I wanted to hear what I knew, and I did. And it was really good. You're going to enjoy it.
I'm so excited. I just hope that they don't end up being a casualty as they were back when they were Rainseed years back. Because that's kind of, I had mentioned to you earlier that them and Night Flight Orchestra are really my two big, the two bands I'm most excited to see this year at Prague Power. So fingers crossed that all the visa stuff works out.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments. And if for no other reason, I just know you're going to have the time of your life during that set. After Majestica, tough act to follow, but I saw Super Monster Party, which was a band I had never heard of.
I was going to ask you about this band because I just found out that they exist and that they're a game cover band, and there were actually two of those on the boat. So I was curious because this one I'm not familiar with. So.
This is a band I think you need to check out. I would have skipped this set, but one of my cabin mates, Doug, was like, you got to hear these guys. And he was playing them the night before the cruise, and it was pretty interesting. Every song sounds different. They do a little bit of thrash, a little bit of like a modern style, a little bit of power metal, and they don't do covers per se, but they create their own songs based on the games. So like they did a Resident Evil track, they did a Zelda track, but it was not the music from the games. It was just like kind of an ode to the games.
Like Master Sword.
Yes. And so for that reason, I think you would have eaten this up.
That sounds like that would have been fun.
I'm not an expert, so I couldn't even tell you what songs I heard, but I just think that you would have eaten this up.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll have to check them out.
I went to go see after this, the obligatory gotta go see Delane at 3:15 in the afternoon set, and that's what I did. They were playing the theater, as I mentioned, and as you can tell, there's a little bit of a pattern here. I try to stay outside or go to the theater. I think they're generally the better venues. I think the ice rink that they convert into a stage is pretty good too, but then the small lounge thing, I try to avoid if I can see a set in a different venue. Again, time permitting. Delane was... When I was up in the balcony, it was a little bit of a low energy set, and I actually got up because I was not enjoying it from my vantage point. So I went down to the floor, and it sounded so much better. Diana Leah is not Charlotte. She doesn't have the power or the range that Charlotte does, but she's close, and I still think she does a very good job on some of those older songs. So by the end, I did enjoy the set quite a bit. I had to change my vantage point because way up top, something was just missing with the way the sound was carrying, so I needed a little extra pick-me-up. But I thought it was a good set. Unfortunately, I did not catch their second set, but I saw them at Prague Power. I've seen them so many times at this point that I didn't feel like I was missing out.
Fair enough.
The next, I wanted to cram in one more set before dinner, and this was another one of those surprises that I would have never in a million years ever guessed that I was going to see this band. And the band is called Fractal Sun. They have released one album. It was back in 2020, and it was called Turmoil. They are a prog metal band from Costa Rica. I don't even know how Andy, the promoter, heard of this band, because I thought I might be the only person that knows this band. But when I saw that they were announced, it was like the biggest oddball to me, because A, they don't get a lot of prog. B, they don't get no-name bands from Costa Rica. And C, I almost forgot about the album because it's been 5 years and they haven't done anything since. Well, needless to say, I went into this little lounge. The mix actually sounded pretty good for a prog band in the lounge. There was nobody there. I mean, nobody there. I could have gone on stage and played with them and nobody would have known any better, except for the fact that I'm, completely inept when it comes to music. But I say that to say it wasn't a flawless set. They're certainly kind of inexperienced. I think that was a little bit prevalent, but at the same time, I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it sounded good, and I feel like if they stay together, I look forward to hearing new material and hope that they can catch on to a tour or something, because there's potential there.
I feel like it's got to be nice, like, just to go to a small, quieter venue and just not be surrounded by a million people, even if for like 20 or 30 minutes, just a little bit of a decompression chamber, if you will. Like, I would be down for that, definitely. Like,
and there was nothing like opposite of it that I had to, like, it was just perfect timing, perfect time of day, enjoyed the set. And then I went to go eat hibachi. And normally I was telling you how we have like 11 people. We went to hibachi with like 15 people. Heather and Justin from Prague Power and Anna Doc from Prague Power, they joined us for dinner. It was just a really big thing around this gigantic hibachi table or whatever. Really, really enjoyable. Had a nice, pleasant dinner. And then I got to go see one of the sets that I was most excited for. Stradivarius, 8 p.m., on the high seas, on the pool deck, playing Visions. And needless to say, it's not like I haven't seen them do this set before, because they played it in Atlanta. But how do you not go see Visions? So they come out on stage, and all of a sudden they start the show with Unbreakable. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Because that song is not on Visions. And after the song, and I like the song, but when it ended, Coltepelto said that they changed their mind. They're going to play Visions the next set, the next time they play. So, I mean, that was a little bit disappointing, but I was going to see both sets anyway. They wound up doing Black Diamond anyway, so like that was cool. But more than anything, they played 2 songs from Episode, and I completely lost my mind. Care to guess which ones?
I'm looking at the set list, so I would be cheating.
All right, well, I appreciate that. They played Speed of Light, which is always a highlight. And the guitar player is a dead ringer for Timo Tolkki. He is he plays Tolkki as well as Tolkki plays Tolkki, so credit to him. And then they played Will the Sunrise, which was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. That was, I marked out completely for that. Great set, great atmosphere, just a ton of fun. I'm blessed every time I get to see that band, truly.
That would have been, can't miss. I would have made an attempt to see them both times, honestly.
No doubt.
They're just so, like an all-time favorite. And speaking of Visions, it's another one of those albums we haven't talked about yet that's kind of surprising after all this time.
I'm at a loss for words. I can't believe that. I am... Wow. Well, something to look forward to, I suppose. After Stradivarius, I go see Swallow the Sun. And Swallow the Sun does both of their sets from the theater, and it makes sense. Because what Swallow the Sun did is they actually played an entire EP with a ballet dancing to the production of this doomy death EP, and then they played some of their other stuff afterwards.
I was hoping you went to this because I really wanted to hear about it.
This was one of the most interesting things I've ever seen in a live setting. I sent videos to Jen, and she's like, well, the music sucks. I'm like, don't listen to the music, because as a dancer, I thought you'd appreciate like the atmosphere and everything else. It was really a tale of 2 sets. When I saw this first performance, it didn't sound really good to me. The crowd was into it, but the mix was awful. And the ballet element was cool and it fit the music and there was a lot of emotion. And even though I don't know the lyrics, I could clearly tell what the story was through the dance. But just fast forwarding ahead, I went to see part of the set the second time. I saw maybe 45 minutes of it, not the full 75 minutes. And it sounded amazing the second time. I wish I could have stayed for the whole thing the second time. But it was really interesting. And I actually thought, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, so we'll do a little live production meeting in the middle of the show, but I thought it would be cool to just listen to the EP that they did the ballet to, because I saw that there were videos online of the entire thing. So I'll post that as part of the festivities, if you will, for 70K week, at the Metal Exchange. But I'd be curious to know your thoughts if you want to do like a live along listen to this doomy death EP that you probably would never otherwise listen to.
I'm game,
Bonus episode for Patreon. So, I'm happy I got to see the set. I was really, really like looking forward to it. It's just, I think the second one struck a chord with me more. And then before I went to bed, Symphony X, only getting an hour on the pool deck at 10:15 at night. Now, Symphony X, we've talked about Symphony X on the podcast. I think we've only done one album. I'm sure we'll do more of them at some point.
We've done 2 albums, actually.
Oh, did we? Okay. All right. We did. That's right. I think we did Divine Wings and we did 5. So, okay. I get it. Here's my issue with Symphony X. I was spoiled because during their heyday, in my opinion, they used to play the New York City area all the time. I would see them multiple times a tour, and I just got to see all of this great music live. And then as they kind of released less material and toured less and almost become a nostalgia act in many ways, they kept playing the same stuff. But I said to myself, you know what? They're playing 2 sets. I'm going to watch both sets. Who knows? We'll see what happens, right? So I go see the first set, and they open with Set the World Afire. They go into Nevermore. They go into Inferno, and I said to myself, I know what this is. It's the same shit they've been playing every tour for the last whatever number of years. To their credit, they ended with 2 bangers from Divine Wings back-to-back, Sea of Lies and of Sins and Shadows. But, there's so many deeper cuts that I, as a big old Symphony X fan, wanted to hear that this set was really disappointing. The performance was great. Russell Allen sounded great. But the first 50 minutes was fine. The last 10 minutes were awesome. The crowd was into it, but it just did not resonate with me at all.
Yeah, I probably would have guessed that, honestly, at least based on the last time I saw them live, which was about 7-8 months ago.
Yeah, it has not changed. But I said to myself, we'll see how the second set goes. And then we went to bed fairly early that night. And we got, by the time I woke up, I was in port in the middle of Ocho Rios, Jamaica. Went into town with a couple of guys just to kind of see what was going on. And to be honest with you, it was not the best port I had seen. Some of the other ones really had a lot going on, whether it be shopping, restaurants, bars. This wasn't as nice as those. You really kind of had to leave the immediate area. And when you did, you were just getting harassed by people trying to sell you, A, take you on cab rides to God knows where, or B, sell you things, most of which would not be legal in this country, whether it be narcotics or people. And so it was just not, it was not ideal. I think I did about a half an hour walk and then I went back. But what I will tell you is we saw the bunch of the guys from Kiss and Dynamite having coconuts with vodka in these big, gigantic coconuts. And I said to Pat, who I was with at the time, I said, if Kiss and Dynamite doesn't play their second set, that you're looking at the reason why. And sure enough, I saw pictures on their social where they actually posted pictures of what I had just saw live. It was pretty funny. And they did play. So all was well in the world. But it was quite the sight. I went back on the boat. I went right to my phone because I wanted to watch the St. John's basketball game. The timing was perfect. They beat Providence, so I was very happy about that. And then I went to the gym and then really just kind of relaxed until the show started that evening.
Nice.
The first set that I wanted to check out was Unleash the Archers. It was at 5:45. I had great seats. I was sitting in the theater, and it just didn't sound good. And you're noticing a little bit of a theme. In years past, I thought the sound was quite stellar from most sets, but I thought that whoever was doing the sound again in the theater just couldn't get it right. And at various points, everything sounded poorly. At some points, I thought the guitars were down in the mix. Other times, I thought that Britney's vocals were a little bit down. For a band that I enjoy, it was a really lukewarm performance, although the crowd seemed to eat it up. So I don't know if alcohol had to do anything about that, but it was not my favorite set of the week, and it's a shame because they are so good live, and I've seen it, so I know how good they can be.
Yeah, that sucks. The last time I saw them, they were opening for Powerwolf in Atlanta, and even like as an opener, they really sounded so good. So like that's got to be that's disappointing. That's a bummer.
Yeah, listen, and at the end of the day, there's just so much stuff here that it's not like the end of the world, but it would have been nicer, but whatever. Went to go have a Bronzino for dinner, and then I went to go see a band called METALEXCHANGE. This was, and you're saying to yourself, well, who the hell is METALEXCHANGE or whatever? I was wondering the same thing. They were not on my radar. They were announced. I know nothing about them, but what had happened was I had sat down at a pub on the ship, and I was having a drink earlier in the day, and they had music playing at the pub as they do throughout the entire ship. And a band is on, and I'm like, this is kind of interesting. It's got like this gothic doom sound. There was something about it that I liked, and Pat was losing his mind over. He's like, what is this? So I Shazammed it, and I eventually found out it was METALEXCHANGE, not realizing they were playing in like 3 hours. So we went to go check out the set, and it was a very intriguing set. It's a band I want to check out more from. I know nothing about them other than like what I heard was cool. I can't even describe it for you because I don't know them well enough, but it was one of those things that was just a nice surprise.
Very good. I'm not familiar with them either. I thought they were a metal Los Lobos cover band, but I guess that's
for all
correct.
intents and purposes, they may as well been. But after that ended, I went to go see Sonata Arctica on the pool deck. Here again, they start the first half of the set was okay. It was a lot of the new stuff that they've been playing, although I do like the new album quite a bit. And some of those songs kick ass live. They were really just so good. And then all of a sudden, because why wouldn't you do this on the pool deck in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? They played Tallulah live, which, it's a metal cruise. And here they're playing this ballad. But I'll tell you something. The end of this set was just so awesome. 3 songs in a row, from My Land to Wolf and Raven to Don't Say a Word, which I forgot how good that song is. Tremendous end to a tremendous set. I'll just say this. I am very excited to see them at Prague Power again.
I have a feeling that they're going to be, they're going to lean towards the older stuff because it's that kind of crowd. So I echo your excitement for that. Yeah.
And it's just and the new album has that feeling, or at least certain elements like we talked about of the old stuff. So it could just be a really big, a win, I think, for us. And I do think that they will play. After Sonata, Symphony X had the pleasure of following that up. And again, I said to myself, what is this going to be? And unfortunately, they repeated a number of songs from the first set. So here they're playing another hour, and although it wasn't an exact replica, they repeated a number of songs. And I'm like, you guys have 8 albums, you have a ton of amazing songs, and you play the same trash. I don't understand it. And yes, they played Evolution, the Grand Design, which was kind of cool, but why are we playing Nevermore again? Or Inferno, Unleash the Fire again, or Set the World on Fire. Like, dude, I don't even care if you play the Accolade. Play something different from the new albums, but play something different. And they just don't do it. And it was the biggest disappointment of the weekend, because I was just saying, you got 2 sets. throw the fans something, because at the end of the day, they took the lazy way out. I'm sorry. And these guys are too talented and too accomplished as musicians to be playing the same stuff over and over again. I am not looking forward to their set at Prague Power at all.
That's a bummer.
And they don't need visas, so they'll be there.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll do something a little bit outside the box.
They have in the past, to be fair. They played all of Divine Wings, the song. Like, that would be cool. But if they do the same set list and just add the Odyssey at the end, dude, I'll find something else to do that night. I've got no interest.
Well, you might not know until it happens.
Well, that's true, but I can walk out. But anyway, I say that to say I did go nuts for Evolution. That was great. The crowd went really nuts for Paradise Lost, and I'll admit that song was better than I expected. I hadn't heard it in a while, but the rest of the set I just thought was very meh. Went to go see about half of the Emperor set on the pool deck just because of the ambiance. I love seeing them on that pool deck. Then I went to go see Stryker, and Stryker was playing in the lounge. This was a lounge set that was jammed packed. You could not fit people in the room. And what was cool was that Lotharo and Unleash the Archers, two other Canadian bands, were there supporting like their Canadian brethren off to the side. It was just a really cool set. I am high energy, good sound. I think they're almost too big for that venue at this point. So I think that when they come back years from now, I have a feeling they'll be in bigger rooms for both of their sets.
Is there an actual like max capacity, or it's just basically like if you can't fit anybody else in this room, that's pretty much that sucks for you, pretty much.
Pretty much, and I think at the end of the day, it really is spread out because there's 3 or 4 sets going on at the same time, so it's not really an issue. But there's nobody checking head counts or anything like that. And quite frankly, if you can't see, you're probably not staying anyway. Because I was very far away for that set, but I did enjoy it immensely. But the set after that is the one that just knocked my socks off. I went to go see the second Stradivarius set, and what do you know? They played Visions. However, what was bizarre is that they didn't play it in order. I'm not sure why, but
sounds like one of our podcasts where we reorder an album.
And that's exactly what I was thinking of as it was happening. And I said, I couldn't wait to talk to you about this. I'm assuming you're not looking at the set list, or are you?
No, I'm not actually.
Pull up so we're going to play a little game. Pull up the Visions track listing. Obviously there's 10 tracks. And while you're pulling that up, I'll just say that the crowd was absolutely, positively bonkers for this set. There were people crowd surfing the entire time. The mosh pit during the fast songs was incredible. And Pat and I, like two idiots, stood there for the whole thing. I should have sat down, but I was so into the music that like I had to be close up for it. It was an amazing, amazing set and an amazing experience. So I guess the question I'll ask for you, what do you think the track listing was for this set?
Oh, well, I can't even begin to guess if it was like not in order, but I don't know. Kiss of Judas, I guess, which is the first track on some versions of the album.
That was the second track they played during this set.
Black Diamond would probably be my next guess.
Black Diamond was the 9th track they played during this set. So you can see how bizarre this is.
Yeah. All right, let's go down the list. Forever Free.
They opened with a Forever Free, which is actually a really good opener, but it was confusing that they started. Like I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, am I late? What's happening here?
Maybe the new order is better. I don't know.
So let me. I'll just stop. Game aside, let me just let me go into it. Forever Free, The Kiss of Judas, into Legions. Sick, right? Like absolutely incredible. They slow it down with The Abyss of Your Eyes and Before the Winter. They play Holy Light. And then the end of this set list is just almost as ridiculous as the beginning. Paradise, Coming Home, Black Diamond, Visions. Not bad.
I might like that better than the actual track listing.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was interesting. So if you're bored, give it a listen. We can.
That'd be great if like the new members or the newer members of the band are just like, we're gonna reorder all the Tolkien albums because fuck that guy.
It was incredible. And then I was hot. I was tired. I had gotten my head kicked in, and I was ready to do it again the next day. It was great. I went to bed, and I was smiling from ear to ear. I was feeling better at this point. All was well in the world. And sure enough, now it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's time to go back out on the pool deck to go see Flotsam and Jepsen play an album that you're intimately familiar with, Doomsday for the Deceiver, in its entirety. And I wanted to catch this set because it was an album that we covered on the podcast many moons ago. And it was great. It was a hot sun. It was just a really solid workman-like show, and I'm happy that I got to see it.
Nice. I'm sure Charles is happy to hear that.
Shout out to Charles. Quite frankly, had I not known this album, I probably would have gone to the other set maybe or whatever, but I made a point to go see it. I'm happy that I did. I dragged some people with me. They were happy. So like all went well. I went to go see one Trollfest song in the rink just to see what that spectacle was going to be like again. It was exactly the same as it was the first time. And then I went to see one of the biggest surprises of the entire ship, a band that I had heard of many times, a band that I was not familiar with all that much at all, but I'll be damned. Septic Flesh, a melodic death metal band, just absolutely tore the pool stage up. And although I've heard that their light show is great, there's no light show when it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever the time it was. But this Septic Flesh set was unbelievable. The emotion, the sound, the energy. It's a band that I'm going to start listening to from now on just because the set absolutely knocked my socks off. And if you're not a fan of the band, it's a band you have to check out. It was that good. And if they come back to New York, I'm going to go buy tickets, even though I don't know a song by them.
Nice.
After that, I got to see the second Crown Shift set. This is definitely a band to keep an eye out for. The second set was melodic. It was rather tight. I thought it needed better sound once again in the theater, but I enjoyed it immensely, and I think that they have the ability to potentially really blow up if their next album is a hit, just because now they're on people's radars. Follow it up with an 8.5 out of 10, and don't look back. They were really good. I think you would have enjoyed both of those bands for what they were. And then I went back on the pool deck for what I can only describe as the most fun set of the weekend, as you can imagine. Kissin' Dynamite in the middle of the day on the pool deck. It was a gigantic party. There's beach balls flying around. There's people flying around. The singer from Kissin' Dynamite is doing his best David Lee Roth impression on stage. It was just a ton of fun. It's almost like they're having so much fun that it's not work for them. It's just like play, but they take their craft seriously because the songs are executed without a hitch. Amazing.
Awesome. I hope that I get to see them live sooner than later.
I don't doubt that you will. I'm sure in some way, shape, or form you will. After that, I went to something which I've gone to in the past. I've never stayed for as much of it as I did this time, but it's this intriguing all-star jam that they do. Other people find it to be completely gimmicky and hate it. I think it's one of the most interesting things they do. Glenn did his Prog Power, over 15 years ago, but essentially they've got a bunch of musicians that come together and play classic metal songs that you probably know the songs. But I think it's an opportunity to see musicians that I didn't get to see from these other bands play together. And some of these lineups together are just absolutely unbelievable. Like at one point, there were two hosts, and I'll get to the host in a second, but at one point, and I wish I had the actual lineup, but Isan is playing with Kristen Starkey and three other people. It was the weirdest conglomeration, but they sound sick because they're such good musicians that when they go out there, it's just incredible. But a bunch of songs that you knew. I'm sure it's posted on YouTube. Go check it out. Again, gimmicky, yes, but when you're that talented, you can pull this stuff off, and it sounds awesome because the music is not the most complicated stuff in the world. But the hosts of this thing were Kristen Starkey from Temperance and also Jorg Michael, who was honestly on the boat and on stage before both Stradivarius sets, but not playing drums for Stradivarius. It was so weird. But he was like Mr. Cruz. I saw this man everywhere, and I'll save my interaction with him for the bitter end. But he's like the most jovial guy in the world. All you want to do is have a beer with this guy, and he's telling stories and asking questions of the musicians in between the changes and whatnot. Really cool stuff. I'm glad I got to see it.
I'd love to know how that came about. It just seems so out of left field, especially if he's not going to play with Stradivarius.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, he never did play with them, but like he was talking. I from what I heard through the grapevine, and I don't know if this is true, I think there was illness or injury that prevented him from like being able to play, and so I think that's the reason why he might have left all those years ago.
Okay.
So, nonetheless, after the All-Star Jam, I go to see Candlemass, which is another band we've covered on the podcast. These guys are like consummate pros. They've been doing it for 40 years. They sound great. The vibe is great. Somebody had called it stripper music just because of that like low end sound. And I'll tell you something, I can't disagree, but they are great. They are great live. If they come to your area, don't miss Candlemass. They're pros. And although I don't listen to them a ton, obviously we covered them on the podcast. I don't know their entire discography. I enjoyed the hell out of the set. I think you would have liked them too, because it's just a very clean sound that's just kind of very accessible.
Yeah, I would have been happy to see them, especially just because they're such a legendary band. So yeah. I would have been down for that.
After Candlemass was the Arcturus set that I mentioned. I was so curious if this band was even going to show up, let alone play the boat. And when I heard that they played that first set and had made it, I was eager to see them. Arcturus, the Sham Mirrors, is the first black metal album I ever heard in my life. And it's kind of proggy, kind of black metal. It touches on a bunch of different genres. But needless to say, I had never heard anything like it when this album came out over 20 years ago. And I remember buying it because a lot of prog heads were talking about it. So I bought it from the End Records for like $12. And I still to this day don't know what to make of that album because it's one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. And needless to say, this entire set was weird. And I loved it. It was one of the most intriguing, different things I've ever heard. And like somehow when you just have it in front of you, it looks great, it sounds great, and the live keyboards made all the difference, like all the difference in the world. I am virtually certain I will never see this band live again because why would I? They haven't recorded new music in like a long time, but this was one of my favorite sets of the weekend, and I'm just happy I could cross them off the list.
Excellent. I love hearing that.
Went to go see the second Hammerfall set. This was the same as the first set for the most part, with a couple of real oldies thrown in and one special guest. So they played they announced during the show, and I don't know how much truth there is, but as they were leading into the next song, they said, we got approached no less than 30 times to add something or play something, and it was not in the set list for tonight, but because everyone's asking for it, we're going to play it. All of a sudden, they play The Dragon Lies Bleeding, and I fucking lost my mind. That is a song that is just so good and so unexpected. And then they went right into Let the Hammer Fall. So and I should note, they also opened the set with Heeding the Call. So like, this was my favorite. Like, as much as I kind of complained about being tired and bored during the first set, this second set was really enjoyable. And let me tell you something. Hammer High, I don't know if you've listened to that song recently. That is an earworm of a song. I was singing it all day in the bathroom. Every time I just can't stop singing the song. And like, I would never listen to it on the album, but it's a really good live song. So I enjoyed the second Hammerfall set. It was almost a redemption act for me.
That's great. I was looking forward to seeing them at Prague Power just because the last time I saw them, they opened for Halloween, and it just felt so lackluster. And I don't know if that was a combination of me not being as excited as I was to see Halloween, or them just toning it down, not wanting to upstage Halloween. But I I just found the set to be just very pedestrian. So I feel like if they just busted out some of those older tunes, it would breathe a lot of life into things. But I guess I'll have to wait until the next U.S. tour because they're off the Prague Power lineup. So
sadly, you are right. Although I do think that if they find their way back here, you've not heard the last of them. And unlike Symphony X, I did enjoy that second set. So like I'm happy that I got to see them again, and it did wet my whistle. I'm almost happy they're not playing Prague Power. Unlike Sonata Arctica, who I now want to see again. I got my Hammerfall fill, but they did a nice job. After this, I went to go see a band that wasn't even on my radar, but I had a couple of people, I don't want to say drag me to the show, but they're like, you're going to do yourself a disservice if you miss this. So I went to go see a band called Samael. I don't know if you're even familiar with this band. This is a Swiss band that has been around for like 35 years. They started off as like a symphonic black metal band, but now they really kind of lean into the whole industrial thing. And I've heard of them at Wacken and stuff like that, but I had never heard any music by this band. And I was curious to check it out because the recommendations that these people were telling me, they're like, you have to go see this. So I stayed for about half the set because I wanted to go see the end of the Swallow the Sunset to give them that opportunity to kind of redeem themselves after the first set that I mentioned. What a band. I have to check out more of this Samael band. There's something intoxicating about this like mellow death industrial sound that I'm like, I'm in. I get it. And it sounded good. The energy was crazy. The crowd was totally into it. Another band that, again, I would have never seen but for the cruise. And I think that's one of my favorite things about it, that I got to actually see this band that was never even on my radar. And I walked out like listening to their music. Like I was listening to it this week on my flight home because I'm like, I want to hear what this band is. I need to hear more.
I feel like there might be some albums we're going to talk about in the next few months that were inspired by this trip.
I think so, because it's just, I feel like stuff that we haven't talked about, but I'd like you to hear, and no better way to do it than this. And I think that some of this stuff is not really outside of your wheelhouse. It's just stuff that you're not familiar with. I mean, I certainly wasn't, but I think that when you hear it, you can be like, this is awesome. I just didn't know it existed, which, is nice. But I go see half of Samael's set. I go see the rest of the Swallow the Sunset. And as I mentioned earlier, so much better, so much tighter. It was like night and day. And I'm so happy that I got to see the second, half of that set. And then I went to bed. And apparently the boat is going to Haiti next year, which is kind of an interesting location. I think they were there once in years past. I did not go, but I've heard that's a nice port. So I look forward to that. I wake up the next morning. I have a flight to catch. And who do I see as I'm exiting the ship? Jörg Michael. This guy, when I say he was everywhere, he was everywhere. I said, I wasn't going to hold him up. I just simply said, pleasure to meet you or whatever. Big fan of your work with Stradivarius. He couldn't have been nicer and more gracious. And then I got on a flight, and then I was at work yesterday. So that was my trip in a nutshell. And I think it just goes to show you, I'll kind of sum up with this. In a year where the lineup was not spectacular, in a year where there was turmoil, like I mentioned earlier, I had a great time. I mean, like, as much as I tell myself, I'm not going to go back next year, I'm going back next. Like, it's just, you just can't not have a good time. It almost doesn't matter who plays because you're going to get those 10 or 15 bands. And if it was 40 bands, you wouldn't have time to see them all. Somebody posted on Facebook that they went to see 90 of the 122 sets on this cruise. First of all, I think that's bullshit.
I didn't even know that would be possible with all the overlap.
And that's the thing. Maybe they saw 5 or 10 minutes of 90 sets, but you know something? I wouldn't have enjoyed that either. I'd rather
it's too because it starts to feel like a job. It starts to feel like work.
Yes, and honestly, like, I don't like all the bands. Like, I don't need. Were there other bands that I wanted to see? Yeah. Were there bands that if given the choice or if the times were different, would I have gone to see them? Yeah. In retrospect, should I have gone to see that first Samael set? Yeah. But you know what? Like, it is what it is, and I have no regrets whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, I've missed lots of bands in the Prague over the years going to Prague Power, and it is what it is. I'm sure I filled that time doing something fun or resting or eating. So, like, it's all good.
I didn't see Isan. I love Isan solo material. It just wasn't in the cards. I wanted to go see because I would rather see a Costa Rican prog metal band that I'm never going to get to see again over Isan, who I've had the pleasure, fortunately, to see also a half dozen times. So like there was just no need to be there for that. And these are the decisions you have to make and why I like mapping it out. But in a nutshell, I had a great time. I would encourage anyone who is on the fence about going to give it a shot. And I suspect that if you go once, you're going to be going, obviously if means allow, in perpetuity, just because you can't help yourself. And it's by and large, the people are cool. I think that most, the group I mentioned seems to be growing each year. I asked Anna, like, what were your thoughts? Like, she's like, I'm not missing it. I'm going again next year. So like, it's just, you can't help yourself. You have a good time.
Yeah. And that's why, circling back to the beginning of the episode, like, I feel like the people that go are just going to keep going. I mean, I think even if the lineup was even less enthusiastic, or you'd be less enthusiastic towards it than you were, like, I think you would still end up having a good time. Because at the end of the day, I mean, to me, it's like you're already on a cruise, you're out to sea, you have all the food and drink that you could want. Like, if there were 8 bands that I was excited to see, like, I would consider that a win, honestly. And then because the rest you just kind of take in what you can, and I could totally understand like why people are going to complain. Like, people in their nature are going to complain. So even if all the bands were announced 6 months ago, somebody would have found something to complain about. So like, but at the end of the day, like, money talks, and it's talking.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like I said, it did sell out. So, here's to next year. I know, it's something that's at least on your radar that you're thinking about. So obviously it goes without saying, I hope you're able to join. And, one of these years we'll certainly get you there. I'm sure there'll be others. I also think there's going to be a migration if Prague Power does come to an end, that people are going to start just saying, all right, well, I can't do this, so I'll do that instead. So, that bodes well.
It would be a lot more feasible for me if Prague Power wasn't on the table, honestly.
And I think that's for most people.
Interest rates go down. My chances of going on 70,000 tons goes up. So there's a direct correlation there.
I think that's exactly right. So anyway, that's that. I'm glad I got to kind of share my experience with you. I enjoy recapping it. And I guess we were remiss not to sign off without talking about next week's episode, because next week's episode is a request. And although it's a band we've covered, we never covered this era of the band, and we certainly didn't cover this vocalist during his era in the band. Do you want to reveal what next week's request is?
I sure do. This is just a special band because they're the first band like we ever talked about. Episode 1, Fate's Warning. We've talked about Parallels. We've talked about Inside Out. We've talked about A Pleasant Shade of Gray. It was kind of like an annual thing, and then I broke the streak. But our friend Charles is getting us back in the Fate's Warning spirit with the 1985 album, The Spectre Within, which was their second album. And like you said, we have not discussed this era of the band, the John Arch era, as it's known. So looking forward to this. I know like 2 songs very well from this album, and I'm not super familiar with the rest, so this will be good homework for me. I'm definitely more familiar with the Awaken the Guardian album, which followed the next year, but those first 2 albums I know probably like three or 4 total songs between the 2. So this will be good educational opportunity for me.
And somewhat timely too, I should note, because this album celebrates its 40th anniversary later this year, so a good primer for that as well. I look forward to it as well. John Arch is just not someone we've talked about, even offline, ironically enough, because I think we kind of grew up with the Ray Alder era, and so and quite frankly, this sounds a little bit more power metal than it does prog. They were starting to lean into it at this point, but it wasn't until a few years later with the I Brigade of Dreams where they really went, kind of full bore into that prog style. But nonetheless, I am familiar with a handful of songs on this album, and some of them are some real favorites of mine. So we'll talk about all that and more next week. But it has been a pleasure as always. I look forward to doing the deep dive into the old era of Fates Warning next week. If you like what you hear, give us a like and a follow. We appreciate it. And consider joining our Patreon, because if you did, you could have been hearing this episode 3 weeks or so early, just because we try to get it out early and often on Patreon.
Yeah, I was just looking at our Patreon feed the other day, and I think we dropped 4 episodes on the Patreon people in 8 days or something like that, including the last bonus episode. So we kind of when we can get ahead of schedule, the Patreon feed, we'll get the episode as soon as it's finished being edited. So yeah, that's one of the perks of joining. So go to our website at metalexchangepodcast.com, and there's a link on the top right corner that'll take you right to the Patreon page, and check us out. We have some cool bonus features, and not to mention ad-free episodes that, like we said, are released a little bit early, sometimes very early,
such as this one. Enjoy the week, my friend. I look forward to catching up with you next week, and we'll talk all things Fates Warning.
Sounds good, my friend.